The New Britain tax collector out of a job, and the city's former mayor facing questions about her handling of its finances amid her campaign for governor.
Your reporter Taylor Knight has more on what both sides are saying about this shocking report and the timing of its release.
Well, an independent report claims that the tax collector mishandled city money and backdated some tax payments, allowing people to avoid interest payments. The report also claims that some of the backdating was done at the direction of or with the knowledge of former Mayor Erin Stewart when she led the city. In a statement, Stewart says there were several times where I was involved in negotiating tax delinquencies and payment plans for individuals and businesses who owed back taxes. I did so in consultation with the finance department and the corporation counsel's office, who would have been the lead on those negotiations. This happens frequently in a city where the goal is to get people on their current taxes. The report was released yesterday afternoon, within minutes of Stewart unveiling her choice for lieutenant governor. She's calling it a political witch hunt. Current Mayor Bobby Sanchez says it's about fairness, not politics, and that it was part of a larger audit of City Hall that's been underway since he took office back in November. He says more findings will be released in the near future. The state's attorney is also looking into this, and Governor Ned Lamont is calling for a full investigation. Your reporter live in studio, Taylor Knight, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.